Okay, so let's get right into it. For decades, it's been a given, right? The US has pretty much been the security blanket for many of its allies. But what if that's all changing, like right now? Today, we're going to break down Victor Davis Hanson's analysis of a massive shift in American foreign policy and what it could mean for the future of the entire NATO alliance. And honestly, it all kicks off with one single, really powerful statement. There is no reason for us to do it. That's the quote that really sets the stage here. With just those few words, President Trump basically signaled the end of an era, the era where the U.S. Navy automatically secured oil routes like the Strait of Hormuz for countries like China or France. This one comment is forcing a huge reexamination of alliances that have been in place for over 70 years. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the new oil policy that really got this whole conversation started. Then, we're going to dig into what Victor Davis Hanson calls the one-way street alliance. After that, we'll see how this is all about forcing allies to step up. And finally, we'll get to the big one. Is this whole alliance actually at risk? All right, let's start with the oil. For as long as most of us can remember, there's been this global assumption. The U.S. Navy will keep the world's most critical sea lanes open for business. Period. Well, this new policy just flips that whole idea on its head. It's a signal that nations who really depend on that oil are now expected to protect their own interests. And this is the absolute crucial point. It's a direct challenge to the way things have always been done. The message is pretty simple. America's new energy independence completely changes its foreign policy obligations. If other countries need that oil, well, now they need to play a role in securing it. And to really get why this is such a shock to the system, we've got to look back at the history of the NATO alliance. This history is really at the heart of Victor Davis Hanson's main argument. He calls the relationship between the U.S. and its European NATO allies a one-way street, and he means that there's been this deep, deep pattern of dependency for a long time. So what does he mean by a one-way street? Well, it's this idea that for years, European allies have kind of gone off and done their own thing, pursuing their own foreign policy goals. But when they need the serious military muscle, they turn to the United States to provide it. And Hanson lays out a ton of historical evidence to back this up. I mean, think about it. From the UK needing fuel and missiles in the Falklands to France needing U.S. reconnaissance in Chad and, asking America to lead the bombing in Libya. The argument is that even in conflicts outside of NATO, like Kosovo or Ukraine, the pattern was always the same. Allies would start something, and the U.S. was expected to provide the critical stuff and lead the charge. And this really gets to Hanson's point about what these allies can do versus what they actually do. He points out that the combined economy of NATO members is a mind-boggling $22 trillion. I mean, that's 10 times bigger than Russia's entire economy. His argument is that these are not weak countries. They are, in his words, perfectly capable of stepping up and pulling their own weight. Okay, so how does all that history tie into the strategy today? Well, this policy isn't just talk, it's being put into practice. And according to this analysis, the standoff in the Strait of Hormuz is basically the first huge test of this new reality. It's the new line in the sand. You can really see how fundamental this shift in thinking is. The U.S. is moving away from a position of automatically leading and taking on all the burden. The new expectation is that allies are going to take the lead when it comes to defending their own direct interests. It's a huge strategic pivot from unilateral protection to, mutual responsibility. And according to Hanson's analysis, this is exactly where Iran completely miscalculated. See, Tehran thought that by threatening the Strait of Hormuz, they had leverage over the United States. What they didn't realize, though, was that the U.S. no longer felt it had to keep that strait open for other nations. Suddenly, that old leverage was just gone. So what are the ripple effects of a change this profound? This brings us to our last section, the potential fallout for Iran, for nuclear security, and, maybe most importantly, for the very future of the NATO alliance itself. For Iran, Hanson argues the consequences could be incredibly severe. Without that old leverage over the strait and facing all this pressure, the regime is weakened. Now it has a choice: spend an estimated $500 billion to rebuild its military, all while its people are struggling. He argues this could push it to the brink of collapse. But this whole scenario raises a terrifyingly important question. If the Iranian regime actually does fall apart, what in the world happens to its highly enriched uranium? This is the critical loose end that absolutely has to be dealt with. So, according to Hansen, there's a clear U.S. strategy for exactly this scenario. Step one is surveillance. You use American air supremacy, we're talking total control of the skies, to watch everything. Step two is intelligence. You find the exact location of that nuclear material. And the final step? Interdiction. You make the call on whether to use air or ground power to go in and secure it, to make sure it never, ever falls into the wrong hands. But let's bring all this back to the alliance itself. From Hansen's perspective, the failure of European allies to chip in their fair share isn't just some oversight. He calls it a terrible, tragic error. And it's a moment, he suggests, that the American people are not going to forget anytime soon. That feeling is echoed by Sean Hannity in the source material, and he offers a pretty stark conclusion. I can see the alliance falling apart as a result of this. They aren't reliable partners. I mean, the ultimate risk here isn't just a strained relationship, but the complete end of the alliance. The stakes just could not be higher. And that's really where we're left. So, is this a necessary policy reset that's long overdue? Something for a newly energy-independent America to force its wealthy allies to finally pull their own weight? Or are we watching the first cracks form that could lead to the end of the most successful military alliance in modern history? That's the question at the very heart of this entire debate.